Talk about our climate spotlight interview. What role could Bitcoin play in sustainable finance? I'd like to welcome to the stage Brad Van Voorhees, CEO and co-founder of the Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol. Hi, Brad. And Jayson Browder, SVP, Government Affairs and Social Responsibility at Marathon Digital Holdings. Sit there, gentlemen. There you go. Brad and Jayson. Good to see you, gents. How are you?
Good to see you as well. Thanks
Can
for
I just say,
having us.
this is the third time I've done this here, and I did one during COVID, remote. And I think it's the first time we've talked about digital assets and Bitcoin. So I think that in itself tells us how far we've come, that you're on a stage at this sort of event. Would you concur?
Yes, I do.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was here last year talking to some folks.
Yeah.
And they were asking, well, what do you do? So it's great to actually be here this year. But I think, there's precedent that's been set, and not by us. I think you look at the BlackRock ETF as an example.
Yeah. That obviously put it in the public domain. Institutions, retail could invest in Bitcoin via this ETF, and it's been a huge success. It's agreed probably the most successful ETF launch ever. Let's just step back a second, Brad and Jayson as well. Brad, let's start with you. Tell us who you are, why you're here, and why the Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brad Van Voorhees, co-founder of Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol. I've actually spent my entire career in environmental sustainability. And I decided to build Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol because I believed that Bitcoin as an asset, is the fastest appreciated asset of the past decade. And climate investors, who I've been engaging with for most of my career, really needed an opportunity to get exposure to this asset class. And so Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol is a business that validates the use of renewable energy in institutional data centers or digital asset mining centers, and allows for climate investors to now buy Bitcoin that is backed by validated clean energy use, and therefore helping to actually drive the clean energy transition through incentivizing these miners who are using energy to pay for renewable energy, to buy the RECs, to have the PPA that includes those RECs, etc.
And as if by magic, there's a miner sitting to his right, Marathon, which is listed, Marathon Digital. Jayson, for those who don't understand, who haven't been introduced to the Bitcoin mining ecosystem, just explain what you do, why Marathon is so vital in this discussion.
Yeah, so Mara is publicly listed company on the NASDAQ. We're the largest Bitcoin miner in the world. We're in 4 different continents. I just think I literally just got back from meeting with some policymakers in New York State, talking about the energy transition and what Bitcoin mining companies in particular are doing to help with that transition, and give some couple of projects that we've done. So most recently, we announced that we are heating 11,000 homes in Finland. We can use 2 megawatts of data center. 95% of that is heat, and then we can use that in being able to heat these homes. That's one use case.
Recycling heat
Correct.
generated from Bitcoin mining. Amazing. Real world usage.
Correct.
Another example.
Another one is monetizing stranded assets. So we signed an MOU with the Kenyan government, with their Ministry of Energy and Petroleum here in Washington, D.C. They have a lot of energy production. They do not have a lot of transmission. And what we can do is we can actually co-locate our data centers next to rivers, dams, etc. Monetize that asset, be able to provide those tax benefits that then you're able to electrify the grid. And another one I mentioned is mining on landfills and flared gas. So we actually, are doing this right now to help meet some of those 2050 targets around methane reduction.
Yeah. I want to ask a question to our audience before I continue this interview. Stick your hand up if you think Bitcoin is sustainable? Is Bitcoin sustainable? Stick your hand up. Right.
Couple in the back.
Couple of hands. Stick your hand up if you think Bitcoin isn't sustainable. Really interesting. By the way, by the time we finish this chat, I'm hoping that'll flip on its head. This is the point, gentlemen, isn't it? Yeah. If you search, is Bitcoin sustainable online, it's like it's boiling the oceans. It uses more energy than a pretty big country. Some people, they know, they understand, like yourselves, they say it's the ultimate climate solution. So I put it to you, Brad. What do you have to say? How difficult is it for you to persuade this room that Bitcoin is and can be sustainable?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I don't want to have to persuade anyone. I would rather folks just look at verified data. So, we now work with about 25% of global Bitcoin mining operations and data centers, and we are validating their use of renewable energy down to the individual megawatt hour level. And so, in turn, we know with certainty that there's a growing use of renewables in the space. But there's some really unique characteristics about Bitcoin mining that, unlike almost any other data center type, are actually very additive to the energy grid and to our energy transition. For one, it's the only baseload energy consumer that is able to effectively turn off on demand. So when the grid needs that energy because the grid is at max capacity, you can't turn a steel mill off instantly. It takes days. So this is actually a service to the grid, and that's just one of the reasons that we think that with our company, by driving miners towards using verified renewables, adding this layer of transparency, I don't want to convince anyone. I want you just to be able to see the data on an immutable ledger that's public.
And every single panel, Brad, has mentioned data, the importance of data, the access to data. We even had a speech earlier that people moan about data, but data is so important. Why is data in Bitcoin mining, why is the transparency so important?
Yeah, so Bitcoin, I think, is oftentimes misunderstood. It is effectively a store of value that is just derived from electrons. It is electrons and computation. And so, if you compare that to its sort of analog store of value, gold, you're using cyanide and mercury to leach, stone and metric tons of it to get just grams of gold. And so it's actually a very simple technology that's really profound and extremely secure. And so, back to the data question, well, I think all these worries that investors have can actually be removed if we have this transparency or degree of transparency where they can sort of peer into the network and see, okay, well, here's where all the data centers are. And, bear in mind, I'm sure many of you guys are starting to use AI more and more frequently. Many of these Bitcoin mining data centers are now starting to become half AI and half Bitcoin mining. So they're multi-purpose. So if we can actually just incentivize and drive these miners to use verified clean energy, and the miner next to me, I know they're doing this.
Yeah.
And we create that ability to see into the network. And that's exactly what we're building, an ability to see in, have that transparency, and know exactly how much renewable energy is going into this hyper-secure network.
But I'd also say, part of my job is to convince people. I mean,
Yes.
that's what I do for a living.
Convince.
So, I'm in the state houses in Washington, D.C. quite often. I think there's a misunderstanding of the grid in general and just energy uses in general. And I'm not going to ask people to show their hands on who understands the grid in this room. But some people might not be aware, but energy usage is like a duck curve. So in the morning, when you get up and you wake up and you brush your teeth and everything else, use a bunch of energy. Then during the day, it goes down, and then up at night. So why do I share that? Well, a lot of the renewable energies that's been built out, whether that's Texas or New York, these are called intermittent energy sources. And during the daytime, they make no money. And without incentives, they won't be built. And so Bitcoin mining in particular solves this. So we co-locate behind the largest wind farm in Texas, partnered with NextEra, which is when these energy or these solar and wind farms are trying to sell to the grid, they can't because it is not cost effective to sell that energy. We buy that energy. We also, if you are developing a solar and wind farm and you do not have the government subsidies to build that, we can partner immediately to make that project viable. And I think a point that Brad meant around the stability of the grid, I think is very valuable. The partnership that we have with the UAE government, we have a 250 megawatt facility in Abu Dhabi. We partnered with ADQ, which is our major investor/partner. We can turn our machines off within a minute. We can turn 250 megawatts of energy off and give that back to the utility to use. And it's very important when you're talking about blackouts or anything else, the flexibility of our data centers comparatively.
What does Mara's CSR look like? Because that's part of your role, isn't it, at Marathon, it's to promote the company's CSR. What does it look like, and how should investors think about Bitcoin as an ESG investment?
I mean, you are investing in a company that is actually making the transition effective. And the technology that we're using, I've given several examples. And if anyone, there's Brad right there, there's our director of ESG. You have some more questions, but when you're talking about some of these goals that leaders around the world have around methane emissions, right? That's 60% more harmful than carbon. And it's produced on landfills, it's produced on flared gas sites. We can co-locate our sites there, capture that methane, and then we mine Bitcoin with it. So you're investing in a company that has technology that's actually solving the challenges, whether it's related to grid stability, whether it's related to incentivizing renewable build-out, whether it's related to monetizing stranded assets in Africa that helps to electrify the grid directly.
Brad, it's been a big year for Bitcoin. Not only is the price almost, but it hit a new record this year, then it's come down since March, and we're sort of in the early 60,000s. But that launch of those spot ETFs was a huge moment historically for Bitcoin. How do we ensure that the growth of Bitcoin is climate aligned?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And just a week ago, BlackRock actually released a paper about diversifying portfolios with Bitcoin and how this is a very unique asset. It can't be modeled using sort of the historical risk-on, risk-off modeling.
Just to put that in perspective, only a few years ago, BlackRock, to put it politely, didn't exactly speak favorably about Bitcoin. To put it politely.
That's a very diplomatic way to say it. Indeed, and I think this research that came out, points. It's coming from the most senior executives within the firm. There's a reason for that, and what we're building at SBP is a way for investors to get that exposure, that alpha, to the fastest appreciating asset of the past 14 years, and do it in a way that you are actually validating that your Bitcoin holdings are backed by renewable energy. So we want to ensure that everyone in this room has the ability to get exposure to that asset class, and back to that magic word, through transparent data.
What's the figure? Is it 9 million % Bitcoin's risen since its inception? Well, I don't know what the latest figure is. It's a silly number, isn't it? But very few people actually bought it and held on to it at the start.
We all wish we had, right?
But final words, Jayson. I think you've persuaded a few more doubters and naysayers. Your final call to action to our audience, reminding them and persuading them that Bitcoin can play a role in sustainable finance.
I mean, you're already seeing it. I mean, you're looking at governments across the world that are partnering with Bitcoin miners because they believe that we can help solve these energy challenges that they're having, and love to continue to engage with people and help share the stories that we're doing around the world.
Yeah, gentlemen, brilliant. Thank you very much. Wish we had more time. Good luck to you both. And do, of course, confront, chat, be nice to both Brad and Jayson, and the head of ESG over there as well. Lots to learn about, lots to discuss, especially if you don't understand it. It's not an easy subject to understand, but once you get sucked in, you'll be living down the rabbit hole. Trust me, and I know you'll concur.
Absolutely, and come over to our booth and learn a bit more about Bitcoin and clean energy use if you'd like, and participate in a raffle to win a little bit of Bitcoin or a little bit of sustainable Bitcoin certificate. We'd love to chat.
Yeah, we're going to have another panel discussion with other representatives from both companies after lunch. So fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much. You may leave. Thank you so much indeed. That's it for the morning session.